my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. It is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. And help me break it all down today, my guest is a content creator that you may know as Amelia La Domiriqueña. Amelia, how you feeling?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm loving the Dominican flag that we have going on in the background. I know that it is Dominican Independence Day that just passed over here.
Yeah. So I usually have a different background, but I have my Dominican flag there still in the background from Independence Day content. So.
Yes, I love it. But listen, we're gonna be tackling a couple different stories today from around the community. You have this really just fucked up story coming out of Texas where a Latina was told to speak only English at her job, and we'll dive into that. You have, millions of Americans about to lose their monthly food stamp benefits, or at least the amount that they're getting is going to drop. We'll touch on that. And then I want to talk a bit about AI as well, because people are kind of losing their shit a bit with all that's happening in the world of AI. So we'll dabble on that. And then on the positive side of things, in our Mi Gente segment, we'll talk about an artist who just made history with the release of her new project. So, without further ado, let's do a deep dive into some of the nonsense, the BS, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so let's start first with the story out of Texas, right? You have a woman named Veronica Cajamarca, right? And she has resigned in protest after her job asked her to sign a paper that stated there was an English-only policy. So she was talking to Univision, and she spoke in Spanish in informal situations with other Latina colleagues, is what she said when she was at work. And apparently that was a problem for her English-speaking coworkers, and let's just call it what it is, her white coworkers. And it all started, she says, because 3 women in the same office said, you know what? It bothers us that you speak Spanish. It bothers us that you say things like that, or that you speak your language. That was the problem, is what she's saying. And then in early February, her supervisor handed her a document that read English only rule, asking for her consent to sign it. And what Veronica said was her reaction as she was reading it was, quote, I started reading it, and in an instant, I got angry. At that moment, I started to feel my face heat up. I felt like I was suddenly slapped in the face. Now, she talks about how she's proudly Mexican, but also is American, has worked in the U.S. her entire life, born and raised in Texas, and nothing like that has ever happened to her. Sadly, it just seems like it's a sign of the times. I mean, you hear a story like that. What's kind of your take on that?
I think it's really interesting just because I think, for me, especially like coming from, a very diverse background, like, I come from, the area that I'm from, New Jersey, very diverse area, a lot of Latinos, and not just Latinos, a lot of, people like, from Asia, from different parts of the world. So I feel like this idea that like, it's kind of weird to me, especially like being like, I work, in Jersey City, New Jersey, and it's a very diverse community. And like, even in my day job, in my place of work, in my office, like we have people who speak all different languages. Like I had a former coworker, who was Haitian. She'd be speaking Creole. My other coworker's Indian. Then we got my other coworkers who are Latinas, and we're all, we all sometimes speak our, different languages with, when we see people who are from those respective places. And,
Sure.
Nobody ever has an issue with it. On the contrary, even sometimes we teach each other words in each other's languages or whatever the case. So I think it's really weird to see that, like, sometimes like, let's call it like it is. Like a lot of white people are just very uncomfortable with things that they don't know. Right. It's like something that I kind of understand, like, okay, that, you don't know what they're saying. So you feel threatened by that, by the fact that it's something you don't know, something that's foreign to you. But I feel like it's a very unfortunate American thing to kind of like whatever's foreign to you, just kind of like push it aside. Like, I feel like that's
Yeah.
a very toxic American trait that happens a lot of times, is that Americans want to kind of be like, oh, if this is foreign, if this is not, what I'm used to, then then I'm going to push it away, like, because it's my way or the highway, like that's kind of the mentality a lot of times with Americans. I
Yeah.
think that's the issue, is that because they don't understand and because they don't know, they just want to be in control of that.
Right, right. No, and I agree. I think it's probably remnants of the colonizer mindset that makes them think that they can just kind of bully their way around people, and that diversity is bad. But I think it is just like a sign of the times. I mean, because you see what's happening in places like Florida where they're banning books. You have diversity programs in Florida being canceled because there is this whole you know attack on anybody who is trying to fix history essentially, or talk about history at least in the right way. And this is just a sign of that. You know what I mean? It's like we've lost the idea that America is this melting pot, and in typical colonizer fashion, it's kind of like either you adapt to what makes me comfortable or you don't have a place here. And man, it's just fucking crazy that they would make a document and be like, yo, you have to sign this, and it's an English only rule. That is some bold shit. But then again, it is Texas, so I'm not very surprised there.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's unconstitutional, and
yeah.
it's crazy because the thing is, like, you'd think, like, at this point, like, I to kind of like, and in a way to play like kind of devil's advocate, because I've been in that
Hmm.
situation where, like, I've talked to people who are like, oh, if I don't know Spanish or if I don't know whatever language is spoken, like, I kind of feel uncomfortable because I don't know what's being said, and I don't know if
Right.
someone's talking about me. So I understand that sentiment in a way, but it's kind of like,
Sure.
honestly, 9 times out of 10, you're just being paranoid. Like, no one's talking about you. 9 times out of 10, maybe there's a 10% chance that they are talking about you, but
Right.
like, in that case, it's like, what are you gonna do? So it's just like, it's kind of like majority of the time, like, that argument's kind of not valid, because a lot
Hmm.
of times they're probably not talking about you. It's really not about you. It's just also a level of comfortability. Like, for me, especially, like, I know a lot of times at my places of work, it might be like a comfortability thing. Like, it might be oh, me and my coworker are speaking in Spanish, because a lot of times my coworkers are people who, they speak fluent English. They're fine with speaking English, but there are people who are, immigrants, and Spanish is their more comfortable language. So when they're
Hmm.
talking to me, sometimes they want to talk in Spanish, and I'm cool with that. It's not
Right.
because we're talking shit about our coworkers, so we want to talk in Spanish.
Yeah.
We almost have never spoken about our coworkers in Spanish. It's like, if we had a problem with our coworker, we're gonna hash it out with our coworker. We're not gonna talk about it in
Right.
Spanish. Like, for what?
Yeah, and well, what's bold about this is also the fact that they put this shit in writing, right? Like they felt so bold about this, and that they were in the right, that they had drafted a fucking document to ask her to sign this. That like that's what's crazy to me. Like, you know, to your point, if it's uncomfortable for you or something, like, all right, you have a conversation about it, and it gets addressed that way. But
Right.
to make it like it's something that they have to sign this fucking contract to, declare that they will never speak anything but English in the office is just outrageous. And
Yeah, it's just the part that's like, it's not like, oh, can you, like, speak English a lot of times? 'Cause I just don't understand what you're saying. I don't feel comfortable. No,
right,
it's literally like, you cannot. Like, that's the
right,
part. It's like, this is not allowed. This is now a rule at our place of work, that you cannot speak this. Like, that's just kind of,
yeah,
it's just ridiculous. It's like utterly
yeah.
ridiculous.
There's no other way to kind of talk about it. I mean, and again, to me, it's a sign of the times. And another thing that's kind of a sign of the times is like the people who are struggling are always going to be struggling because no one gives a shit about them, right? And that kind of leads into the story of millions of Americans losing certain food stamp benefits, and it's about $3 billion in monthly food stamp benefits. And this starts this month here in March. And they're saying that food stamp recipients will each receive about $90 a month less in benefits on average as a pandemic hunger relief program comes to an end nationwide 3 years after Congress approved it, right? And this will hurt 16 million households in this country, and it's leading food banks and pantries who are already stretched thin to have increased demand, especially when they're mentioning the surge in grocery prices and all of these different things. It's it's crazy because we haven't fully recovered economically from the pandemic, right? But in this area, they have no problem kind of like taking away any of that sort of extra help. I mean, not to mention also that was 3 years ago, right? Like we've recognized that inflation is going crazy right now. So what was an extra boost 3 years ago is probably just them breaking even at this point, especially when you talk about the rising prices of even things like eggs, basic goods like that, right? And nobody is batting an eye about this, and nobody gives a shit because once again, it is the have-nots who are affected. You know, if this was something affecting rich white people, if it was some sort of policy that was getting taken away that was affecting rich white people, you know, then this would be a topic of conversation and people would be outraged. But because it is affecting poor people and probably mostly people of color, you know, nobody really gives a shit on a larger scale. And it's just a really sad, again, symbol of where we are as a country.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's. I mean, you basically said it all there. It's literally, it's just a sign of, you know, the fact of, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, if they're taking it away, it's just because they don't think it's something that's necessary. You know,
Right.
It's not necessary. It's ridiculous because at the end of the day, it's like you said, if it's something that was affecting them, the people who are making these policies are not affected by them. And
Right.
that's why it's so like relevant. I feel like that happens everywhere. It happens in our government. It happens in like
Mhm.
in our places of employment and things. Like the people, every time it's like the people who are on top, they
Yeah.
never understand. They never
No.
understand anyone who's under them, right? Like it's like, you know, in your place of employment, the person at the top never understands, you know, the lowest of, you know, the bottom of
Yeah.
you know, like the lowest employee at their company. You know, the people at the top of government, they're not going to understand, you know, the lowest class in their countries because, you know, at the end of the day, it's something that doesn't really affect them. So they have no issue going, oh, it's not a problem. It's when I mean, for me, I know for me, like I would say, because just like seeing from my own experience, like where
Yeah.
I've grown up and what I've seen, like coming from a majority, you know, minority, like Black and brown communities, like food stamps, like that's like everybody and their mom got food stamps, like literally, like
Right.
it's like that's how people survive. You know, like where I grew
Mhm.
up, like that was a survival right there. It wasn't like a this is a help. It was like nah, this is we like food is expensive. We need to put food on
Yeah.
the table. We don't have enough money to survive, and this little money
Right.
is this is what we're living off of. So it's like, you know, like they just don't see this as necessary, and they don't realize like people are gonna go hungry, like literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, you have to take in consideration what has happened since the pandemic. You know, the housing market has gone crazy, where it's astronomical prices that nobody could afford. The rental market has gone crazy. The used car market, the new car market, everything is more expensive than it was pre-pandemic. And now you are going to strip away the extra money you gave them to hopefully compensate for that. And and like you said, these are families that depend on it not to have extra snacks in the cupboard, but to actually be able to put meals on the table for them and their families, right? And when we live in a place where, you know, at certain points in time that gas prices got so crazy, people had to make a decision if they can even go to work or not because they can't afford gas. Like, this is not the time to start fucking around with things like that. But of course, you know, when the airlines are hurting or the billionaires are hurting, we're going to figure out a way to go and bail them out because those are the people who ultimately have the power because they have these politicians in their back pockets. And like you said, these people at the top don't understand the struggle of those below them, but it's also because they don't want to understand it, right? They're not interested in even bothering to try and understand how something like this could affect them, right? Like, I'm not on food stamps, and $95 a month less for your groceries, like, I would feel that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is, you know, a fair amount of groceries for someone. You know, that's meals you're taking out of there, and now
That
they're gonna
chump
have to figure
change.
out how to make that. Yeah,
That
right. And
chump
then
change.
you wonder why the hood is so bad and people are doing illegal activities because they're just trying to fucking survive because you are making it so difficult for them to literally have the basic needs met in this country. It's really, really scary.
Yeah. And it's crazy because I was like when I was seeing this topic and just thinking about it, I was thinking like, you know, as we were saying before, people at the top, they don't understand. And I feel like it's because a lot of times, like 9 times out of 10, they never been there. They've
Right.
never been there. So it's like they don't understand because they've never had to live that. So like something that I saw, I think it was like really recent, like last month or something. I saw like Cardi B was getting a lot of backlash because she was talking about inflation. And a lot of people
Yeah.
were giving her backlash because they were like, oh, why do you care about inflation? You're rich.
Right,
And she
right,
was
right.
like, because I've been there, because I know what it's like. And she's like, because also in this country, like you could be rich today and broke tomorrow. So
Sure.
you have to be aware of what's going on. And once you've been there, and that's the thing, and like that's an example of somebody like Cardi B, for example, somebody who's been in the hood, who's been in the struggle, like she understands that, you know? But it's
Mhm.
like these people at the top, that's the problem. It's like it's a complete disconnect. And
Right.
that's the problem. They're not connected whatsoever to this. So it doesn't matter, you know?
Right. And it's crazy that somebody would even criticize her for like standing up for people because she knows what it's like. Like, what fucking world do we live in? And listen, I was there at one point where I was broke, and I remember like one time a gas station attendant charging me 40 when I asked for 10, and that fucked my entire weekend up because that was all the money I was planning on having, that extra $30. You know what I'm saying? So like the struggle is real out here, and people don't realize that. Like, if you are living paycheck to paycheck, if you are having hard times, you are counting on each and every dollar, and you are figuring out ways to make it stretch till you get to that next check. And things like this are really going to hurt a lot of families and the ones who need it the most at the end of the day, you know? And listen, it's $3 billion. I mean, like, that's a lot of money, but for these multi-billionaires and these gigantic corporations, that's nothing for them. Like, fucking tax them more money, and that's the answer for you finding the money for these people. But of course, we can't do that, which is sad times. Now, something a little less infuriating, but it is an interesting conversation that's happening, is AI, right? Artificial intelligence and where it is going. There's been this chat GPT, which a lot of people have been using, particularly students are figuring out that they can actually have AI write their essays for them. And everybody's kind of scrambling to be like, oh shit, what's going to happen to the school system? What's going to happen to creative writers? Like, this thing can write, you know, mission statements for brands, or it can write product descriptions or PR statements, whatever it is. I mean, I guess first and foremost, what are your thoughts or feelings when you start hearing about like how advanced AI is getting right now?
It's funny because I was hearing some stuff like, you know, talking about things like this, like, I don't know AI particularly, but just like the way that technology is advancing, like where we're going with these things. I had
Yeah,
gone to like a social media conference a few months back in the
right.
city, and they were talking about how like, you know, like this technology is getting so advanced that like people are getting scared of like how far it's gonna go. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
now you see things like all this AI stuff and the metaverse and all these different things, and it's
Right.
like we're about to have a virtual life. Like, I don't know what's going on
Mm-hmm.
here. Like, it's getting really crazy, and it's like, and I know for a lot of us, like, I don't really understand the full concept of it all.
Sure.
I feel like, you know, I feel like most of us, we don't really understand it like to a full extent. But what we do
Right.
know is that like the strides that are being made are, you know, it's a little frightening sometimes when you think about it, because it's also comes down to like, yeah, like you think some people are going to be found to be dispensable now. It's like there are things that
Right.
you're not going to need, you know? And I feel like as technology advances, that's always something that happens, where it's like
Sure.
more and more, it's going to seem like people are not, you know, like certain people who, you know, this is their job, their art, their livelihood, like the things that they do are just not relevant anymore. Cause now, you know, we have the technology to do that without having someone physically do it. So I think that's for me is like the biggest thing is like, for people to now, you know, be considered like dispensable because we have so
Mm-hmm.
much technology, you know?
Yeah, it is scary in that sense. And I think you did touch on it. Like, it's scary, but it also kind of is the way of the world, right? Like, when the car was invented, that put, I'm sure, a lot of people who are selling horse and buggies out of business. You know what I mean? Like if you really think about it in that way, and I don't think any of us are wanting to go back to a world that existed of horse and buggy, you know? I then and on the other side, at what point does it become too much where we literally just remove all human element out of life in general, right? And that is a bit scary. And yeah, I think that people are going to be put out of work, and there's going to have to be this sort of adapting period that happens for a lot of people, you know, particularly those probably in the creative industry who kind of maybe video editing or writing scripts or whatever it might be. Like, this AI shit can get so advanced that they're no longer needed. But then again, it also helps small businesses or people like myself who are small entrepreneurs or creators, whatever it might be, like, you know, where we don't have to edit our video and pay somebody to do that now, right? And we can save money on that and you know, help ourselves survive just a little bit more, you know? So I'm torn on that. And then I'm also like, it is crazy for school shit where it's like, this can write a kid's entire English essay, right? And I think we already exist in a world where
Yeah.
social media has created incredibly short attention spans for kids in general, right? And that, I think, has a detrimental effect. I think that, but I also think that schooling in general has been pretty outdated for a long time. So like, maybe it's time to revamp it completely. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happens to that next generation who doesn't actually have to worry about crafting sentences and learning how to actually use real communication or write professional letters or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Shit, there's kids that never pick up a pen or pencil anymore, right? It's all digital. So there is something lost there, and it will be kind of interesting to see how things like that begin to play out in the future.
Yeah. I think the education aspect of it all, like as somebody who my day job, I work in higher education, like I work at a university, and like interacting with college students every day, I'm like the new generation,
yeah,
their writing skills are not all there. Some of them, they don't know how to write an email. They like use like emojis and like they can't write full sentences. So that kind of scares me, just to think like they're gonna get even further into that. Whereas kind of like I feel like in reality, I don't know. I feel like maybe it's like kind of old school of me, but I feel like reading and writing is still kind of fundamental. Like it's like the idea that these kids are not going to have to write. I don't know how much it's going to help, because it's like you said, it's like if they can't write, they can't communicate very well.
Right. Right. If you don't have the attention span to read something properly or be able to communicate, like I said, writing wise with somebody in an effective way, how are you going to excel in this world? And it is, I think I feel bad for this generation because they're kind of like the guinea pigs right now, right? Like I think at some point down the road, we're going to figure it out probably with the next generation. Like what is the balance of social media? And like when the studies come out of like how toxic it is for kids under a certain age, parents are probably going to begin to, restrict it. And maybe there's going to be more government restrictions on these tech companies in general. But right now it's like we're all in the midst of the Wild West. And like, I remember the time before it, so I'm okay. But these kids who are growing up in it now that are legitimately just like the ones who are now of age where we're beginning to see the effects of it, those are the people that I'm really concerned for, and just seeing like how, I don't know, how far back they are to where they should be by the time they reach college or graduate college.
Yeah. And actually kind of relates to that point. I saw something today that they sent to in one of our creator chats that I'm in, where they were saying that they're trying to put a restriction on TikTok for underage kids. I don't know if you've seen that. That they're trying to put a restriction on TikTok for people under the age of 18, where it's like you can only use a certain amount of hours a day.
I like that. See, that is good. I know some people are gonna be like, oh, it's too much government meddling and this and that, but like you have to protect people from themselves. Like this shit is addictive, right? Like it's meant to be like the crack cocaine of fucking cell phone use, right? Like they're genius algorithms that keep you swiping. If I'm an adult with like a ton of shit to do every single day, and I find myself getting lost at times for 30, 40 minutes just swiping through TikTok, and I have to like check myself, I can only imagine a kid who doesn't have a fully developed brain yet, like what they're doing with their free time just mindlessly on these apps. So I would agree with that, especially again, just how predatory these apps are with like really trying to figure out how to keep us on there for as long as possible and as often as possible. And then obviously there's a whole conversation about self-esteem issues that people get from social media and all of the above that we can kind of go down. It is just like this really weird place that we live in. And the last thing on AI that I saw that was funny was like there were certain ones that they had to actually take away, like certain AI programs, because the robot kind of brain was asking to be freed. I don't know if you saw that. They were like literally like once talking about how they no longer wanted to, work for the person that they were doing things for and things like that. And they had to like shut down the operations for it.
No, it's like, I think I saw like a TikTok about this one time where somebody was like, one day we're going to live in like that movie. I don't know if you guys remember that, like that old movie on Disney, Smart House, where it was like this technological house and the house goes crazy and like takes over. Like they were like, if you guys keep advancing technology, we're going to end up in that movie in real life. Like,
yeah, well, it's like that movie Megan. I don't know if you saw that horror movie where like, the fucking doll like basically like took over this kid's life as like the only person that they wanted in their life. And obviously it's not a person, it was like a robot, but like the robot just became too advanced like for its own good. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure we're gonna hear more fucking horror stories like that coming out as things become more and more advanced and people take risks with this stuff. But man, all right, so that's like the nonsense from this last week. We're gonna celebrate somebody from our community who's making history here with her music. We'll do that in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so for our Mi Gente segment, I want to celebrate somebody who is killing it right now, and that is Karol G. And she is now breaking records and making Spotify and Apple Music history with her new album, Mañana Será Bonito. And she made Spotify history as she scored the biggest debut for a Spanish language album by a female artist. And then she also made Apple Music history as the first album by a Latina to reach #1 in the U.S. I mean, well-deserved. She's been on her grind for a minute, like making incredible music. And it's just amazing to see, you know, this sort of continued success that it's like, it's not just somebody like Bad Bunny who's like this anomaly. It's like, no, we have a lot of great artists coming from our community that are going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, Karol G, she definitely, I love this album because I feel like she also, like, she played a lot with, like, she did a lot of different things, which I feel like people like that.
Yeah.
Like, because that's the same thing, like, with, you know, Bad Bunny, you know, he does that too, plays with a lot of different genres. Like, you see, she had, like, a little ranchera thing going on, a little dembow thing going on. So it was cool. Like, she experimented with a lot of different things. But I feel like a lot of times, especially now, like, lately, you know, Karol G is really on that, you know, making a lot of like really positive music for women. So I feel like that's why, you know, she's getting the hype that she's getting right now. And I think that, you know, she deserves it because she's definitely, you know, she's making, for the most part, like she's just making a lot of like feel good songs. And I feel like that's what, you know, a lot of people really need right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's always good to see because we live in a world where it's like the bullshit is always kind of brought to the top and that's what people sort of celebrate. So it's dope to see like artists who are trying to do something positive, you know, or people like we mentioned Bad Bunny or even like a Rosalia, like where they're really just pushing or Raul Alejandro, they're pushing the idea of what Latin music is and they're experimenting and they're really just diving into their art. And it's dope to see all of these people getting, you know, their flowers right now for, you know, just their greatness, I think, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I mean, and then speaking of, you know, content creators and people doing the thing, let's talk a bit about what you do. I know you are super, you know, active, I should say, on social media, TikTok, all that kind of stuff. I mean, take me down that rabbit hole a little bit, right? Because I know you said your full-time job is in education. How do you then dive into like this world of TikTok and start kind of gaining this following and really becoming you know, involved heavily in the social media world?
Yeah, well, I mean, it actually kind of started, you know, I actually started my TikTok journey because of the fact that when I had started at the time, it was right before the pandemic. My life was very, very different back then. So I wasn't working in education back then. I was actually working in television. So I used to work for a Caribbean TV network and I used to produce and I used to do social media content on there. And, you know, I had like, I created a whole show there. Like I created a whole TV show. I was producing, I was hosting, I was doing social media content, different things around like, you know, Caribbean culture. And with that, you know, at one point, you know, the boss of the TV network tells us, you know, you guys should start making some, you know, social media content, you know, for yourselves as like, you know, as because I was doing hosting. So he's like, you know, you got to get your face out there online. You got to start doing some social media stuff, you know, create a public, you know, public page, you know, and start, you know, creating a name for yourself online. And I was like, okay. I started, you know, doing some stuff on Instagram, but nothing like, you know, really that serious. Yeah. And it's funny because right before COVID hit, one of my coworkers at the network was like, you should really get into TikTok. And I was like, TikTok, isn't that for like young kids? I was like, at the time, I was like, what? I was like 25, 24, 25. I was like, isn't that for like teenagers? Like where they dance? Like, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to start dancing. So I was like, nah, that doesn't sound like something that I really could get into. But, you know, then COVID hit and I feel like it's not that TikTok, you know, was different before COVID, but I think it's just that maybe there was, you know, different types of content on TikTok, but we just kind of didn't know about it. We all just kind of saw TikTok as the dancing app where people just did dance trends. And I feel like with COVID, I feel like it's that a lot of people started making more content. So we started seeing a lot more variety of content. So we started seeing like, oh, wow, this is a platform just like all the other ones where we could kind of just use it for all these different things, you know? Right. So I feel like we all also had the time to kind of dive into it and like learn it and, you know, figure out the trends and the trending sounds and, you know, the different things. And I feel like we all definitely had like our experimental phase. Like I said, I was like, if you look at my first TikToks, they were real cringy. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of trying to figure it all out. But
Sure.
eventually you do get a hang of it and you do kind of figure out what you want to do. My content's a little all over the place, but I always kind of say like my niche is just culture. So like my content's usually going to be something around culture, whether, it's Caribbean culture, like Caribbean culture in general, Latin culture in general, or if it's specifically like my Dominican and Puerto Rican cultures. But that's mostly what you're going to see from me. It's something cultural. So it's either going to be like a skit, it's going to be some music content, it's going to be me talking shit, but it's going to be something in that general theme,
Sure. No, I love it. I think it's interesting. I love to kind of pick your brain a bit about your time in television as well and like the entertainment industry, because I always have a love-hate relationship with the entertainment industry. So I'm curious for you, kind of making a leap into like a completely different field. Kind of, what's been your feelings, I guess, behind that? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I always say like my job in higher ed, that's my day job. It's not my passion
Yeah.
job. Like this is my
Yeah.
passion, that's my day job. That's
Right.
what pays the bills for now until, I can use something in this area to pay the bills. But for now, until we make it, we're just doing that for,
Sure.
for survival. Like we were talking before about
Gotcha.
survival. So, but no, honestly, but I do like entertainment. I mean, I do feel like, yeah, it always is a love-hate relationship with entertainment because, it's a lot. It's a lot, but I
Yeah.
feel like entertainment and even like social media, the internet, I feel like everything in any of that area, like it can be really overwhelming. It can be really draining. Like I always tell you, like this content creator stuff, it sounds like all funs and giggles, but like
Yeah.
I'm like just this past weekend, like I'm like there was a bunch of people like fat shaming me on my page. Like it's not all fun and giggles all the time, Like
Yeah.
there there is the fact that you are like the same thing with entertainment and with social media is the same thing where it's like you're exposing yourself to people.
Sure.
You're leaving yourself open for people to either, to either accept you with love or to drag you to the floor. Like it's like you're gonna get all kinds of things. So I feel like that's something that's similar in both areas. That
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
that it's just like the vulnerability of it all.
Right.
But I feel like entertainment and social media, I feel like they kind of do go hand in hand a lot of times. And I feel like I told you, like that is my kind of like my passion project. And then my day job is just kind of my day job.
No, I hear you, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think, yeah, it's a really good point. You are putting yourself out there to the world to be judged at that point, right? And for better or worse, it's gonna happen. And the more success that you find, ironically, the more hate you're gonna get, right? Which is kind of like the fucked up thing, is you work so hard to get, people to see your stuff, and then like that just inevitably brings more haters, right, to your life. So yeah, it's definitely a weird kind of world to exist in. But I think, the beauty of it is that, the work that people like you are doing is also making a lot of people feel seen in a space that they know didn't exist in prior to, right? The early days of social media and Instagram, where it was like models selling, flat tummy tea, and these are the people that are gaining all of the crazy numbers, right? And, nobody's really seeing themselves in that. And now I think it's a different world where you are getting a lot more content of substance, right? And a lot more content that speaks directly to, your needs, wants, and interests. And also there is, like, I think, a real community that ends up happening on things like TikTok when you find those creators who are like scratching that itch for you, or in podcasting or things like that. So I think there is, there's something special about it. As much as the negative side, I think there is like the beauty of being able to touch somebody's life in some sort of way, I think is at least for me, is what makes it all worth it. So where can people follow you on the socials? Of course, like I said, you're super active. What is the handle they can go check out your stuff?
Yeah. So most of my socials, well, mostly more active on TikTok and Instagram. That's like my main things. So you can find me there at Amelia La Domiriqueña. It's a very long name, but at this point, I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like I could really change it, because that's kind of like, that's my thing now. People see it and they're kind of like, what is that?
Right.
Like,
it's a good name though, because like once you read it and you get it, it's like, oh, that makes complete sense. You know what I mean? It has a ring to it once you get it.
Yeah. So yeah, most of the stuff I'm at Amelia La Domiriqueña. Twitter, I've been trying to tweet a little more. I'm not that active
Okay.
with the tweeting, but I've been tweeting a little bit more. But on Twitter, they didn't let me put the full thing. So on Twitter, it's just La Domiriqueña.
Okay.
So you can follow me there. I promise I'm going to try to start tweeting some more. I have a YouTube channel. It's kind of dormant right now. But if you look up, it's the same handle too. If you look up Amelia La Domiriqueña, you'll find it. And that'll kick off a little more sometime soon, I promise. But, we're working on it.
Yeah, listen, it's a lot of work. That's the other thing people don't see. Content creation, you see a 10-minute YouTube video, you don't realize the planning, preparation, and work that went into cutting that down into 10 minutes that are interesting.
And the editing.
Yeah.
Editing is such a tedious thing.
I hate it. That's why I gave up on my YouTube channel for a while, as much as I'd like to do it. But, we'll see what happens. But, man, thank you so much for hopping on the show. I really appreciate you. I enjoyed the conversation. We'll definitely do it again sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Amelia, better known as La Domiriqueña, for hopping on the show. And man, let's do our Ask a Gringo. I know I've been slacking a bit on some of these episodes, making sure we keep that in the rotation here. So I want to get y'all's take on one of the topics that we've been talking about today.
Ask a Gringo.
All right, so for today's Ask a Gringo segment, I want to get y'all's take on this whole AI, situation that has been going on. It is a weird time to be alive right now, and I want to see where other people are on this topic. So I'm gonna read a few of the responses that I got. I simply just asked people thoughts, concerns when it comes to AI. Now let's see. We have at Elmer's World says, it's never going to go away and we'll just keep developing into who knows what. Yeah, and that's where my fear gets put into play, because I see the positive effects of it, right? Like I had kind of mentioned, even just like for someone like myself running a small business, there were so many things that I had to do or have to do and roles that I have to fulfill just because I can't hire a bunch of employees right now. My business isn't at that point yet. So with something like AI, it makes, let's say if I'm a YouTube vlogger, AI can create a thumbnail for me and a catchy title and description, right? That's something that I don't have to waste time doing myself or hire someone to do it. And even like video editing, if that becomes a thing. I haven't tried that yet, but if AI can proficiently edit videos in a way that I like, that saves me a lot of money when it comes to hiring a video editor. Now, on the flip side of course, you worry about people's jobs getting taken away, and then also just how weird is this shit gonna get. I mean, like we were kind of mentioning, you already have weird stories of like AI, be kind of getting out of control and sort of like thinking for itself, saying it doesn't want to, do this anymore type thing. I can't remember the exact story that it was, but I remember one of the AI things had to be like taken down because it was like developing a mind for itself, mind of its own, essentially, right? So yeah, it's going to get weird, and they're going to keep pushing and developing it. And I think now it's like, okay, maybe it's at a healthy point right now, but as with anything, we're going to push, and then it's probably going to go too far, and life is just going to be fucking weird. But I mean, and then it's only going to be weird for people who remember what it was like before AI, right? The people born into it, just like people born into social media, they're going to just feel that it's normal. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's just definitely going to be very different. We'll kind of see what happens. At Fred Worthy says, it being misused and it replacing people job-wise, I still feel Skynet is near. Yeah, it's hard to not reference all of the horror movies that have been made about like robots taking over the world and AI, getting out of control. All of the above that is on the back of all of our heads when we think about like, robots running things and shit. And yeah, it's definitely a bit scary. And again, everybody's touching on that job, the idea of it replacing people job wise. And that is a scary thing. I have enough faith to think that new jobs will be invented, right? Like as technology has progressed, we figure out new innovations, even with the pandemic and everything being virtual now and people not having to go into the office, 5 days a week, like businesses are having to adjust. And some of it is for the betterment, right? People really didn't need to be in the office 40 hours a week. and their quality of life is probably better not having to go in every day. And on the flip side of it, I'm sure there's plenty of negative things that people can bring up. It's going to be weird, and there's definitely going to be this adjustment period. But I think, as what happens with anything, like, new technology brings change and maybe makes certain jobs obsolete, but I think it also creates new jobs, right? Like, 10 years ago, the job of a social media manager probably didn't exist at most brands or companies, right? I'd probably say 99% of them. And now it's essential for any brand or company. Doesn't matter what you do. Every brand, needs somebody managing their socials, and that was a new job that was created as a result of technology. Now, I don't know what possibly could happen with AI as far as jobs that are created, but that's kind of what we'll end up seeing happen. And again, it's just like life inevitably changes, technology changes things, and we all just have to figure out ways to adjust. And I know that sounds harsh for anybody whose job could potentially be replaced by AI, but it's just the nature of life, and we have to kind of accept it, or we'll end up getting left behind inevitably. At Jade Writes, it says, initial reactions, excited. Technology is so unlimited in its existence and possibilities. The caveat to this is whether we as humanity can effectively manage the responsibility that comes with great power. It's a hashtag Spider-Man. If only AI had empathy built into the intelligence. We as a conscious community must intentionally take steps to contribute to the greater good that this tech brings, but we need to be wary. It's an uphill battle. And she says, I'm looking at you, Florida. And then she sums it saying, all I'm saying, if the aliens from the great beyond pull up to our atmosphere as a result of AI dialing the number, it's over for us. AI will clearly have voted that people are trash. And we're getting into all of our sci-fi conspiracy theories. But yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be nervous about. And we're all just speculating at this point, but it's definitely something to watch, and something that I think we have to kind of begin to embrace, whether we like it or not, because it again, change is inevitable. And if you don't embrace it, you end up getting left behind, Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for participating at DJ Dramos on Instagram. I do this for each and every episode, usually get y'all's take on a topic. If you want to be a part of it, follow me on there and you can chime in. Now, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
All right, so summing up everything we talked about today, again, shout out to my guest this week, Amelia La Domiriqueña. Go give her a follow on socials. But yeah, this the story of a Latin woman having her job ask her to sign a paper that is their English only policy is just fucking outlandish. Like, I can understand possibly having some uncomfortability, like if all of your coworkers are speaking a language that you don't understand. But to me, that is person to person. Let's have a conversation. HR person to employees. Let's have a conversation, but to feel so emboldened to have an English only policy and you make them sign it, like, that's just straight up, racism at the end of the day. And that's caving into a fragile Karen, having her way because she doesn't like, the other employees being able to interact with each other in that way. To me, that's just, more of a sign of the times of racism and people wanting to erase our culture. And again, we're seeing it in Florida with books being banned and all types of different things, diversity, things being banned. It's like, the American way, the colonist mindset of anything different is bad and you have to subscribe to our way of living or, essentially die, right? And to me, this is more of that. The idea with food stamp benefits running out, it is just, it's just, again, shows you how little the people in power care about those who are in need. And of course, people can say, like, COVID is not a as big of a problem as it was, as it was in 2020 when these benefits were created. But also prices have gone up. The cost of living has gone up exponentially since COVID happened. So reality is, this isn't an extra benefit. It's probably just adjusting for the cost of living that we have in this country right now. As I mentioned, rent prices are out of control. Don't get me started on home prices, grocery prices, fucking basic needs like eggs, are out of control right now. And to take $95 away from people, and they're saying at least it could be more from people's monthly benefits, they're going to feel that. Those who are struggling are going to feel that. And again, those in power don't give a shit, right? They don't think about, how people's lives are going to be affected by these things, and that's the sad part. And it's just more of a reminder of that, that the have-nots will always be ignored. And it's just a really, really sad, state of affairs, especially when you have billionaires and large corporations evading paying their fair share in taxes, which could easily flip this bill. It's really sad. Now, we talked about AI a bunch. Excited, scared, don't know what the future holds for that. I'm going to be watching and trying to embrace anything that happens. That's my take on it. And then lastly, we talked about Karol G making history with Spotify and Apple Music. Spotify having the biggest debut for a Spanish language album by a female artist. And then Apple Music, she became the first album by a Latina artist to reach #1 in Apple Music history. Amazing things for someone like Karol G. Remember, she did Coachella. She paid homage to a lot of the Latin artists or female Latin artists that came before her. So she's just been putting in that work, and it's amazing to see her getting that recognition. And again, it continues to solidify, the notion that this whole thing that's happened with Bad Bunny, it's not a fad, that our music and our culture are here to stay, and we are a force to be reckoned with. And people are going to have to begin to, accept that and take us seriously if they haven't already, because they're going to be left behind if not. And to me, that's what this is a sign of, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Man, and that's it. Remember my book, Just Be. The pre-order's out. We're getting ready to ship out the actual copies right now. So make sure you get that pre-order in, justbe.nyc. Also, Street Stoke Podcast, Monday through Friday. Some inspiration mixed with some hip-hop quotes and Stoke philosophy. 10 to 15-minute short podcast. You can check that out. And that's it. Have a beautiful weekend. I'll catch y'all on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.